Thanks for joining us at Right On Replicas, where we bring you the best scale model kit reviews on the planet. This review covers the Revell kit number 85-2034. It's a 1/24 scale kit of the Ferrari Superamerica. It comes molded in 110 parts in white, chrome, and clear with vinyl tires. Revell rates this as a skill level 2 in the old system for the intermediate builder. And it's the exact same release as the German version, but they rate theirs as skill level 4 with 114 parts. This sample was released in 2006, but you can still find them on the market on online forums and also in local hobby shops. Now, it's typical good Revell quality, and it includes nicely detailed engine and transmissions and the rear differential and axle. And if you want to, it could be made into a contest model. It's that good a quality. The interior is nicely done, and a piece of black screening is provided with templates to cover the side vents, the hood intake, and the left rear fender intakes. The body's in multiple parts, and overall the kit is molded very crisply, and there's very little cleanup needed. The instruction sheet is great, and when you're done, the overall dimensions are about 7 inches long, 3 inches wide, and 2 1/4 inches high. Construction starts with the motor, and paint the following parts: aluminum, the motor sides, the motor's bottom, the top, the heads, the exhaust manifolds. Now the motor front is black and steel, and the oil filters are black with silver housings. The exhausts are silver, and the distributors are silver. So your detail painting will begin to look like this. And the motor cover is red aluminum black with some decals number 10, 12, and 18 applied. Assemble the sides of the motor, attach the motor bottom and top into place, and then add the oil filters to the motor's bottom. Attach the motor front, and then install the heads on each side. Add the exhaust to the manifolds and install those onto the motor. Then add the distributors to the cover and install those onto the motor. Grab these parts out of the kit to start the chassis, and then paint the chassis pan flat black with aluminum A-arms and on the front and the rear. And then paint the exhaust pipes aluminum with silver mufflers and catalytic converters. Attach the exhaust tips to the mufflers and install the mufflers into the center support. Install this unit into the chassis pan. Gather up these parts to build the rear suspension. Then assemble and paint the differential aluminum with flat black axle boots and a black drive shaft. Then paint the support wall flat black. The A-arm is aluminum and the shock is yellow with a black spring. Now note the spindles are specific to the side that they are being installed into, so the pin is made to face toward the front. Now we can go ahead and attach the differential to the chassis. Add the spindles with the pins to the fronts, and then install the A-arm into the back wall and the shocks into the A-arm and the back wall. Then install the finished units onto the chassis with the shock sitting in the mount of the A-arm and the spindles in the A-arms too. Get these parts out to work on the front suspension and front end, and we will now paint the tie rod black with aluminum ends and flat black boots. The spindles are aluminum, the A-arms are aluminum with flat black supports, the shocks are yellow with black springs, and the radiator is silver with black fan blades and a gray fan wheel. Install the front suspension in this sequence. Snap the tie rod onto the spindle without glue, and then snap the spindles into the lower A-arm on the chassis without glue. The tie rod is forward. Now slide the shock into place and attach the upper arm to the frame and snap the spindle in place without glue also. And note for the shock location there, attach the motor in place on the frame and connect the drive shaft. Then add the fans to the radiator and install the radiator last. Here's a photo from the vantage point of the underside so that you can see how all of that stuff is positioned into the chassis. Paint the skid plates and fender wells flat black, and after they've dried you can install those. There's a small chrome plate that is installed at the transmission too. Install the skid plates into place on the bottom of the chassis, and then install the wheel wells to the top side of the chassis. Get out the parts for the wheels, and the tires are now assembled to the chassis portion, so note that the front tires are smaller and that they are directional tires. So paint the wheel backs silver and brake discs silver with red calipers, and decal 29 goes on the calipers and decal 37 on the hub centers. To create a more used look on the tires, press and roll the tires on a sheet of fine sandpaper, about 220 grit, and this will rough up the tread, giving it a street-worn look. Assemble the tires by inserting the rear rim in the back side, and insert the brake into the rear rim into the tire. Now add the rim front, making sure to line up the spokes on the front and rear rims. Install the tires onto the car with the calipers to the back. And due to the spindles in the rims having notches, they really only go on in one position, so you should be safe there. But you're now at the point of having a rolling chassis to build on. Gather these parts and we can start the interior tub. And we're going to do this in steps, as there's many small decals to place on the parts. First, assemble the seats and the seat backs and paint them as a unit, and then decal 19 goes on each of the seat set's headrests. The door pulls can also be installed on the door panels, and decal 8 goes on the speaker covers. Now once the parts are painted in the base color, I use tan for mine, and I'll detail each step. So final assembly will consist of installing the seats, door panels, and the console, and also the pedals. To add some detailing to my car, I decided to add some carpeting. So I used some carpet flocking. You can buy this as an aftermarket product or at a craft store sometimes. And you just sift it out, and on the base color you add some white glue, and then sprinkle it into place, tamp off the extra, and you have yourself a carpeted floor. To detail the console, I used some flat black on the radio and the AC controls, and the shifter plate is silver. Then decals 3 and 4 go onto the shift knobs, number 6 decal goes on the bottom panel, and 7 and 16 go on the kick panels. Now the shifter then goes into the hole on the plate. Get these parts out to finish the dash, and it'll be set aside for later assembly, but assemble the column and paint it black. The wheel is black with a tan bottom to match the interior, and decal number 5 in the center. Add the chrome control pad onto the column and install the wheel. The top pad on the dash is black with a tan overall color, and then the radio area is black, as are the AC vents. Decals number 1 and 2 are used for the instrument panel, and then attach the column to the dash and set it aside to dry. So now we can prepare the body for painting, and before doing any of the painting, we're going to put some of the body pieces together that you see here. So install the back bumper and the mirrors, and then install the hood hinge to the hood, and then wet sand all the parts with some fine sandpaper, wet or dry, like 800 grit or better, and then rinse them off clean. Now primer the inside and outside of all the parts with a good quality primer, and then the roof panel and the mounts for that can be painted semi-gloss black. And then once the primer is dried, you can sand it out, smooth it out, and rinse it off, and dry it again, and then spray your base color onto it. In my case, I used a sunshine yellow for the Ferrari. After the base coat has thoroughly dried, we can apply the decals to the exterior, and it's a Ferrari, so there are virtually only a few. So place those into position with some warm water, and I still would recommend a setting solution from the aftermarket to make sure that they stick to the body real well. It just seems to help in most cases. So let those cure overnight, and then give the body with the pieces of decals in place on it a clear coat to seal them into position. Now we'll install the roof. So it's in multiple parts or steps. So use some white glue to attach the glass to the roof panels, and once that's dried, the roof slides into some slots in the body, and but don't glue that. Attach the rear support that was painted black, and then install the lights into the front header and install that onto the front windshield frame. Now locate the notches pointed out here with the arrows, and then the rear support snaps in place into those notches. So once completed, the roof will be able to rotate freely to an up-top position. Now we grab these pieces and the dashboard that we had prepared earlier and slide the dash into place on the body. There's receiving slots there for that, and there's a frosted edge on the windshield, and I used a black Sharpie to draw the black surrounds, and it comes out pretty good that way. So paint the wipers and the mirror black, and install the mirror faces and attach the mirror to the windshield. Then using some white glue, glue the windshield into place, then add the wipers. We're going to work on the hood and the engine compartment next. So you see these pieces, get those out, and use the decal map here to place the decals onto the firewall, and then install this into the car. Now we're going to cut some of that screen for the openings here. So for the side vents, you'll cut those using two of the W3 screens and a W2 screen. And we'll also then, if you prefer, there's decals that you can use instead of the cutting the fiber out. So you just glue that into place with some white glue after you've cut those out. Now to install the hood, I found that it would kind of bind at the back end, so I cut the hinge off there a little bit of the end so that it didn't bind on the back edge anymore. So now it works just fine without binding. So we're going to work on the front end pieces, so grab these out from the kit and then install the headlight bezels and the grille from the inside of the body, and install the mirror faces and the mirrors. On the headlight covers, use a black Sharpie and highlight the raised gasket area on the inside there, and install the headlight covers with some white glue. I wanted to personalize my Ferrari, so I went ahead and printed out my logo about the size of a license plate in 1/24 scale, and then I put a piece of glossy tape over it. By the way, I used just a color inkjet printer and some plain paper for that, and then you can mount that as your license plate. And now we'll get out the tail lights, and we'll paint the tail lights stoplight red except for the centers. Now the white centers go on the lights of the inside closest to the trunk lid, and then the yellow turn signal amber goes in onto the centers on the outside lenses. So install those into place. Also, you can use some white glue here to just glue the back of the paper and install the license tag. The final basic assembly is to install the chassis and the interior onto the body, and so now we'll insert into place the chassis, lining up the dash and the rear panels so that they become flush, and then use screen W1 to cover the rear fender vents, and start at the rear of the car to put the insert the chassis in at about a 45-degree angle, and then pull that down towards the back or the front, placing the exhaust tips out the holes in the bumper and back. Then you just kind of shoehorn it down in there, pull the side body out a little bit as you go along, and everything should line up smoothly, and you can just snap the body into place in the chassis. Once you've got the chassis into place, the engine will pop out of the base there, and fill up the engine bay. You can take a look here and see how it'll look when it's in place, and make sure that the hood will open and close freely. So here's a photo of the front end of the vehicle, and you'll notice that the hood doesn't really nestle down well into the engine bay there. I would suggest prior to painting, go ahead and take some material off the edges uniformly all the way around the hood, just to make sure that it sits in place more securely and correctly. But here's the back end too. As you can see, this is a nice looking model, especially in this sunshine yellow color. It's not your typical Ferrari. You might say it's not your father's Ferrari. Anyway, I digress. So they're starting to look good, so we can display this on our shelf. Well, there you have it. The car is a pretty accurate replica of the real car, and the build-up was pretty straightforward. No snags that would hinder the average builder from putting together a nice model. The motor's detailed, and it looks pretty good finished in the car. The interior was easy to assemble, but the details were crisp. The chassis and suspension were solid and straight, and once together, it assembles well, and it's pretty good and solid. Now the body assemblies can be put together before you're painting, so then you don't have to do as much handling and mating of seams after paint, so that gives it a better overall look. The final look is a real nice, nicely designed and engineered model, and overall it was a pleasant build. Just that hood fit was the only issue I found. Some light flashing on the body panels, but it was a really nice kit to build. I'd recommend it to anyone. We hope you liked this premium scale model kit step-by-step review. And so that you don't miss any more, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. But you can find us on Facebook and always at www.rideonreplicas.com. Thanks!